What are the most extreme measures people take to protect love? You don't mess with a sheepdog's flock. They might look all shaggy and goofy, but mess with their flock and they will, and I mean it, unleash all hell. I'm a sheepdog. I have a flock. There's no ceremony involved or anything. Some people are just in the flock and others aren't. There's not much you can do either way to change your status. I either feel that way about you or I don't. I feel that way about most people who are significantly smaller than me, which, at 6'6", winds up being most people. When I was in my early 30s, I lived in a townhouse in a bad part of town. Seriously, at least once a week we were treated to the sound of gunfire for one reason or another. It was the kind of place you kept your head down and didn't interact much with your neighbors unless you like waking up gut shot. Connie lived a few doors down. She was a member of my flock. Unfortunately, she also had a habit of dating the worst possible men, and among those, Wade was head and shoulders the worst of the worst. He was a big too. About 2 inches shorter than me but similarly built. One look at him and I didn't like him, but also, I knew that I did not want to stand toe to toe with the guy. It would be brutal and bloody, and there was no telling how it'd turn out. I'm protective, but I don't have a death wish. Wade had a mean streak. He was prone to violence and would often verbally abuse Connie. I could hear them screaming at each other even through the walls with the music turned up, and she lived in the next building over. I grumbled at the verbal abuse and said something about it to her when he wasn't around, but she wasn't inclined to do anything about it, so, I kept my head down. Then one night, weekend, about 10:30, I hear Connie screaming. Literally screaming, "Help me. Help me." That got my hackles up, but again, Wade. Big dude. And he liked his knives. I thought about just calling the cops and staying out of it, but the cops were super slow to respond in that area. She'd be beaten to hell, or worse before they even showed up. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Sure I was. But Wade was also messing with a member of my flock and it just couldn't be allowed to stand. So, I grabbed 2 Ziploc baggies, put gauze, quick clot and antibiotic cream in both, and then, I grabbed my prized possession at the time. A British bayonet that had come to me by way of India. It was about 3 feet long with a pommel and a ring on the crossguard that would allow you to affix it to the end of a rifle. Of significance, it was way bigger than Wade's favorite knife. I put on my long black coat, put my 2 baggies in my pockets, one in each, unsheathed the bayonet, and tucked it out of sight in the folds of my coat. Then I went outside. Connie and Wade were outside by his motorcycle, Wade looming over her, Connie leaning against the brick of her townhouse, cowering. She was holding her arm protectively, as though it were injured. She saw me come out the door and screamed, "Help me." Again. I headed that way and Wade turned and took a step toward me. He said, "Stay out of this." And I could tell he was drunk. He was swaying a little and his speech was ever so slightly slurred. That info went into the processor, calculating. "Connie. Go to my house. The door's open. You call whoever you need to call. I'll wait out here with Wade." She darted around him, giving him a wide berth. He took a belated step to follow her but I moved toward him like I was going to interpose and he scowled, but let her pass. He said something to me, I don't remember exactly what, but it was some kind of swaggering bravado meant to intimidate. I wasn't really listening. I was watching. Calculating. I remember what I said next though. "Wade, please don't. You're drunk. You're not thinking clearly. Go home and sleep it off. We can talk about it tomorrow. No permanent harm done, right?" He basically told me to go have vigorous intercourse with myself, so I repeated my request. "Wade, I'm asking you, please don't. We don't have to do this." And at that point, he'd had about enough of my mouth and rushed me. Move forward, coat up in a flourish to block the clumsy knife thrust, down to one knee, blade up, aiming for the spot just above his left kneecap. Bullseye. Fight over. I tossed him one of my 2 Ziploc baggies and told him to stop bleeding all over the sidewalk, looked him in the eye and said, "I tried to tell you. We good? Don't mess with my beloved sheep."